Hey everyone, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in to Relevant Jukebox, and today we're going to talk about the latest album from Porter Robinson, Nurture. So this is the long-awaited second full-length album by the electronic producer and songwriter, and it just feels like ages ago where I started hearing his name crop up in a lot of EDM music circles with the buzz of some really viral singles like Language, which ended up landing a debut record deal with Skrillex's label. He seemed like he was being hailed as like the next big thing for the genre overall, but he ended up pivoting and taking a pretty far step away from that sound on his debut album Worlds in 2014 and kind of strayed away from the super neon-soaked danceable grooves that broke him through. And then the hype just kind of seemed like it trailed off after that. I didn't really hear much of Porter Robinson's name being kind of like twirled around like it was. And here we are 7 years later with a follow-up album which sees Porter fine-tweaking sounds that landed on Worlds and then pushing things into more of a synth-pop direction. Sonically, the album can come off a little bit plain at first, but it's actually pretty dense with tons of layers of like twinkly synthesizers that give it some sort of flair. And there's also a lot of pianos that are used on here that give it a much more warm and intimate feeling at the same time. The vocals, however, caught me off guard. There's actually only like a couple guest vocals here and there, but it's actually Porter singing most of the time. Sometimes he uses really no effects and you get his kind of plain voice presented to you that's very easy to distinguish, and other times he pitch shifts his vocals up. It makes him sound a little more feminine, which is kind of cool. But this album just borderlines on unlistenable for me at times. Mainly because the vocal melodies just come off so vulnerable, like too vulnerable for me to even get into the vibe. And you're dragged through that same really vulnerable vibe on track to track with these like ascending vocal melodies on the choruses that just kind of make me cringe. However, they're not all bad though. I mean, when it works, it comes out pretty well, but that only landed on maybe about 3 tracks for me. One being Look at the Sky, the lead single, which has a very catchy chorus to it that I think is pretty awesome. Mother was another track in here that caught my attention as being one of the strangest instrumentals, but also one of the most captivating. I really like the way that the drums sound in contrast to those really huge wall of sounds that feel very alien-like that are spiraling over them. Also, Musician was another spot that caught my attention as it's also a Kiro Benito collaboration. Sarah's vocals are actually really alluring over that extremely bright instrumental. However, repeating the track can kind of get stale if I'm being honest, as it's extremely repetitive overall. There's also a couple instrumental tracks on here that stray way off into a more abstract and impressionist direction. They're pretty cool standalone pieces, but in my opinion, they do take away from the flow of the album, and with the more straightforward synth pop cuts, they make them come off a little bit more basic sounding. I think for me, this album would have worked a lot better if he was able to find a marriage between those abstract cuts and the more straightforward synth pop ones. But it also didn't help that I just got extremely tired of the mood that this thing can put out. I don't know, I mean, it's just not really for me, but it could be for you, especially if you dug artists like Madeon or even, oddly enough, like the Run for Cover Records roster. I feel like this could strike a chord between those indie pop emo crowd, but for me, not so much. With that being said, I'm feeling a 5 over here on Nurture. So it looks like this release has been pretty popular so far. There was a double limited clear LP that was up for sale on his web store that got sold out by now. There is a deluxe version of the same thing that comes with an extra booklet and some other swag with it. That's a lot more expensive though. But what's kind of cool is if you only dug maybe a track or two from this, like I did, there was a various handful of different 7 inches of the singles that are still up for sale. And if you have listened to Nurture already, what did you think about it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and share, and if you want more content from me, hit that subscribe button. Peace.